What is up, Terps fans? Welcome into another Fear the Podcast. I'm Adam Arno. I'm pleased here to be joined by a good buddy of mine, Bryce Hendricks, one of the sharpest basketball minds I know. Right now, he's an assistant coach at Big Bend Community College, also a host of a fantastic NBA draft podcast. If anyone here listening to this wants some NBA draft coverage, find out a little bit more about where our guy Derek Queen is going to go, check out the Upside Swings podcast. So, Bryce Hendricks, the man, the myth, the legend himself, thank you for coming on. How are you?
Yeah, no, I'm great. I appreciate the intro and got the whole biography out. So I feel a little bit famous, but always a pleasure to do podcasts with you, Matt. I feel like you and I have chopped it up quite a few times now, and this is a little bit different for us. Usually we're
Switching
talking about
gears.
different topics. This is a little bit more. I feel like what I love, even though I do the draft work, I really love college basketball and I love WSU hoops, even though it's obviously a shame to lose these guys. I think it's interesting to talk about them, in this new context.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bryce just said it. We're going to be talking about the two Washington State transfers, or one of them a Washington State transfer by way of Indiana in Myles Rice and Isaiah Watts. So I don't know. Let's start this one out with Myles Rice. He's probably the name people are more familiar with of the two, I would think, by virtue of being in the Big Ten. So 6'2", going to be junior guard. Like I said, spent one season in Indiana, 1 year at Washington State. Started 25 of 32 games last year, averaged 10 points, 2.8 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 1 steal, a little over 2 turnovers, shot 32.5% from three on relatively low volume, about 2.5 attempts per game, and was an 82% free throw shooter, so pretty decent touch on the jumper there. So we'll get into maybe the shooting here a little bit, but I guess, Bryce, let's just start out with a very simple, how should we feel about adding Myles Rice to the Terps?
Yeah, I think in the simplest form, I think the best way I'd put it is Myles Rice was the starting point guard on a WSU team that made the NCAA tournament and won a tournament game.
Sure.
And for those of you that aren't very familiar, that is not a thing that happens very often.
Good point.
Just the truth. The last guy you could really say was the starting point guard on a WSU tournament team. Got a cup of coffee in the NBA and had a really successful overseas career. I think in and of itself, that is very impressive. And, Myles is, so this is, I don't know how personal you want to get on this, but Myles is from my class. We were
Oh,
freshmen the
cool.
same year.
Okay.
And so when I was working with the WC women's basketball team, I would see Myles all the time, both during his actual redshirt freshman year
Mhm.
and then the medical redshirt year where he missed the year while he was fighting cancer. And so, it was one of those things where, you got to see him all the time. And, I would talk to him here and there, and he's just a great guy. And obviously the story is really compelling, but the truth is, entering that freshman year, I don't think many people had expectations for Myles Rice, the
Sure.
basketball player. They just thought, oh man, how cool is it that
Yeah.
this
It's
guy
cute. It's a cute
overcame,
story, right? Yeah.
yeah, he'll be the 11th guy on the bench, and
Right.
and every time he gets in, the whole crowd will erupt, right? Because it's such a cool thing. And then he didn't start the year as kind of the starter on that team. Well, I guess he did start every game, but he wasn't the kind of the presumed guy.
Sure.
Joseph Yesufu was going to be a big part of things, and he ended up falling completely out of the station. Future NBA All Rookie First Team guy Jalen Wells was kind of going to get the keys in some ways to the
Mhm.
offense, but Myles Rice really earned the role of kind of lead initiator there, and the thing that separates him from a lot of guards, aside, he's a really good athlete. But I think above all else, there's just a real cleverness with the ball and funk that is very similar to the types of guys that I think really excel in well-spaced offenses.
Okay.
He's and
That's
that
a bit of a problem, though, considering
yeah,
Maryland has
yeah,
absolutely no shooters right now, but that's all
and
right.
and that WSU team was not well spaced either. So I think nor was Indiana, and
Mhm.
I do think that's potentially a hindrance, but he is so hard to stay in front of, almost in there's obviously a high end version of this, but just to give your listeners an idea, there are times where he will put together some Shea Gilgeous Alexander level combos where he'll just get by someone in a way that you're just like, man, I don't know that I've ever seen someone hit those 3 moves in a row exactly like that. And there's just like, he's so fun to watch, and that he's just so free flowing in terms of his actions. The downside with Myles is that hasn't always led to true efficiency. He's never been the most efficient guy overall, inside or outside the arc. You know, he can sometimes be a good shot maker, but not always. And he's kind of a hot or cold type of guy in terms of his shooting. His finishing is also kind of up and down. Every once in a while, he'll throw down a dunk where you're like, oh, I didn't know a 6'1" guy could do that. And then you know, he'll get blocked at the rim by someone who has no business blocking you know, Big 10, Big 12 basketball player's shot. So he's sort of an enigma in that way. And the truth is, if he had been on one team, he would be on this really obvious upward trajectory in terms of skill improvements. But I think because he's kind of been chopped into 2 different systems now entering a third, it's been harder to get a sense for exactly how much better he's gotten, I would say.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that was actually the next thing I was going to ask you too. So great segue. As a freshman, just under 15 points per game last year at Indiana, a little over 10, and I couldn't get a sense for. And this is not a knock on the old Pac-12 before the you know, whatever the conference situation is, but I would say the Big Ten on aggregate is a better league than that last version of the Pac-12. So I couldn't tell if it was a step up in competition he struggled with, it was the system, like, or Indiana was just a weird mess of a whole bunch of stuff, or what really led to him sort of taking a step back, at least production wise.
Yeah, and you know, I wish I had a clean answer here. I think the biggest thing is that I thought the system was really bad, and I thought the spacing was awful, and you know, it's hard to go from your second best perimeter player being an NBA player who shot 40% from 3 to your second best you know, perimeter playing being someone who is definitely not that. That Indiana team, though it had its moments, you know, was a pretty rough watch. And I think that there was a lot of Myles kind of banging his head against the wall, trying to make things stick. I also do think that maybe he started, or at some point there was like a mild injury he dealt with.
Yeah, he had a little nagging thing.
Yeah, that you know, I think maybe hurt his athleticism. So I mean, it didn't look like he was getting by guys as easy. Maybe that is a product of the competition level increase. But I would, my general argument would be I wouldn't take too much away from that Indiana experiment, other than he is someone who probably needs the ball in pick and roll situations a good amount. And you know, at WSU, when he had that, he looked really good. And in the games where he didn't, he struggled a bit more. You know, he's not a great closeout attacker. He's not a consistent catch and shoot guy. Maybe that'll change. Maybe that'll develop. But the truth is, it can be, and this is as someone who's working in it now, it can be harder to develop when you don't have a stable, steady situation around you. You know, it's a lot easier to say to spend a summer focusing entirely on getting better at a skill when you're not also fielding calls from a ton of coaches and trying to figure out exactly what you want to do and talking with your agent. And, you know, all this stuff has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I do wonder, you know, exactly how much those hard skill improvements have come. But I will say that I think that the Myles that we saw at WSU, if you just transplanted that guy to Maryland, is still a positive Big Ten player. And I think that the ups and downs at Indiana were likely a product of, if not it's not entirely off of Myles' back, but I don't think it's all just him not being able to handle the level of competition.
It's also just a coaching downgrade too, no matter how you want to look at it, going from Kyle Smith to Mike Woodson, the creativity, understanding how to use guys, making them all fit together. Like, I don't think anybody that watched Mike Woodson teams thought those were particularly, you know, well thought out.
And something that Smith was specifically good at, that I also thought Kevin Willard was good at, not to reopen the wound, but Smith is a great in-game adjuster. So, you know, if a team was doing something to really keep Myles off what he wanted to do, he would in game or at halftime or whatever really find a way to exploit what the defense was doing and get him going. And I do think Myles might be the type of player that can be dependent on that sometimes, which is good and bad, right? It's good to be able to execute those different changes, but it's also bad that you sometimes need a coach who's going to do that
And a problem solve for you.
Yeah. So, there's definitely some questions there. And the truth is, Myles did have to miss 2 full years of playing actual basketball.
That's right.
And one where he couldn't even really be on the court. That whole year where he was dealing with lymphoma, like he was, in a hospital and kind of barely walking around, much less getting on a D1 basketball court and playing major minutes or anything like that. So, all those things have probably added up to, some kind of stalled or halted development. But I do think that Maryland fans should at least be hopeful that if Myles returns to the level he was at WSU, that he can be a really, really positive guard with an outsized chance to be like a high level guard.
Okay, I like that. I think the thing that most excited me about the pickup was some of the other pieces that they've added around him. Like him and Pharrell Payne in a pick and roll with Payne as the roller, vertical spacer, lob catcher is really intriguing to me. And then I'm excited about them adding Elijah Saunders as well as sort of a pick and pop threat for him too. So I think he'll have partners in the pick and roll, which is where, you touched on this, but I think that's where I've seen him kind of be the most, a toughest matchup for defenses to deal with is him in a pick and roll. I would say so. I'm looking forward to that.
Especially if you can get some spacing around him.
Yeah, just a little bit, right? Just a little bit would be nice. So hopefully some of these guys, bring it a little bit here. A 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio basically this year. I don't know. Is he a true point guard? Can he be like an offense initiator, or is he more of just a combo attacker slasher type? Like, I don't know. How would you describe him?
Man, it would be nice to have like a really comfortable answer there.
Okay.
I think that at his best, he can be a point guard in a way that, the other WSU transfer we're about to talk about just does not have that in his game. But really, he's I would call Myles Rice more than anything is an advantage creator.
Okay.
And he's not always the greatest advantage exploiter. And he, I think, is often dependent on coaches putting him in the right situation to, either make simple reads as a passer, or be used more as that type of off guard play finisher. And I think, I would imagine that Maryland is going to want to use him as the point guard. I know they have, some other kind of guard-ish guys coming in, but that's my guess is that the expectation is that Myles will be the point guard for this team next year. But you shouldn't expect him to be a high level, a high level, playmaking point guard. He's going to create a lot of advantages off the dribble, and he'll throw simple passes, and I don't think he forces bad shots all the time. But you're going to have to live with, especially if he's feeling good, every once in a while he's going to take one where you're going to be like, that was probably a waste of a possession. And his turnovers can sometimes be like really frustrating.
I saw a couple when they played Indiana. I was like, ooh, what is he trying to go for there? But I kind of like going for a little bit here and there sometimes.
He'll throw the ball way out in front of him, with an obvious dig there. Or one that really sticks out in my mind was like he was running like a north action where like a roll replace, and he jumped in the air to try and create the window for the roller, and he like stared back at the shooter who was popping, and no one with the shooter, and he was wide open, but he tried to throw it to the roller anyways, and it was just right to the defense. Like there's going to be moments like that where he thinks in his mind something looks cool, or this is going to be the it's going to create a dunk, or it's going to create a highlight, and then he'll throw the ball to the other team, and you're gonna like those are just that's the Myles Rice experience. And I think that's oftentimes the experience with these high level handle and creative guards. You get a lot of fun out of it, and they're at their best. They are some of the most joyous basketball players you'll ever see. But then every once in a while, you're going to be really like frustrated watching him do some really stupid stuff on the floor. You kind of just got to, take the ups and downs with it.
I think Buzz Williams seems to be willing to live with that. Like he just, emboldened Wade Taylor to do those things. And I imagine they sold Myles Rice on coming here and playing, essentially the Wade Taylor role in that system. So, yeah, I am expecting a little bit of a roller coaster here. I guess just one thing we haven't really talked about yet is the defense. Can he guard anybody? Like Buzz doesn't typically play a ton of guys that can't guard. Like you have to have some level of defense there. So I don't know. How did you feel about him on that end of the floor?
I think he's a really good havoc creator. I think he has good hands. When he's used as someone who can, similar to Watts, not to get ahead of ourselves, but when they are used as someone who can be aggressive in passing lanes, who can close out really high and try and, take away someone's strong hand, knowing that they have help on the back line, like that stuff is pretty good. The screen navigation is bad. The one-on-one defense is pretty inconsistent, especially if guys are stronger and able to get any type of leverage on him. He's pretty position locked that, you want him to guard the other team's probably secondary creator, and that you don't want him on their best point guard because he's not going to get through screens, and he's going to get scored on one-on-one a good amount. But I think he can contribute to a good defense. I mean, that WSU defense was a top 20 defense in the country. And he was if not a big part of that, I think Jalen Wells was probably the most important part of that with Oscar Clough and, future champion Ruben Yelu behind them. But Myles was kind of the free safety of that defense. And as a free safety, I think he makes really good reads. His gambles can be a little bit audacious sometimes, but he's also a really high level transition player. So you kind of like that.
It's worth it.
Yeah. You'll live with it if it means that if he does get that steal, he's going to get a layup, or someone else is going to get a dunk or a wide open three. But there will be times he'll get back cut, or he'll shoot a lane that the pass doesn't come, or he's a little late and then it gets there. So he, similar to his offense, I think he's at his best, he's a great defensive player, and that he might get 5 steals in a game. Yeah. But at his worst, he's really potentially damaging and really reliant on coaching and surrounding talent to put him in a good spot. Part of the issue at Indiana was that they were such a conservative defense overall. Now he still managed to have a 2.1 steal rate, which is good, but their defense is very much don't get beat type of defense, and that's not what he's great at. He's really good at, hey, play a tendency. Like this guy really wants to hit this, between hang dribble, and then he wants to go. If you're going to dive at that hang dribble and you can get a steal, great. And if he does some wraparound behind the back, okay, well, we're going to have help behind you. You just need to not fully get out of the play. He's good at that type of stuff, and he has an okay motor for someone who does as much as he does offensively, but he can't execute schemes that are really focused on just not getting beat, because that's just not what he's built for. If it's about not getting beat, then someone's going to go through his chest and get to the rim. So
I think that'll be good for him in a Buzz Williams system. I think they'll let him kind of just do his thing a little bit, and he'll be surrounded and supported by some other really, solid defenders on his end too. So I'm looking forward to that. I guess let's just wrap up the Myles Rice portion of this just overall. Like, if you had to guess, reasonable, solid Big Ten starter.
Yeah, I think he could be a starter on a Maryland team that makes the tournament.
Okay, I like that.
Whether he can be like a top 2 player on a Maryland team that makes the tournament, I would say you're really stretching it there. But he can be the guy who stirs the drink for like a good defensive team that makes the tournament. And that's what he's done once. And I think he has that ability. He's really kind of the perfect floor raising offensive player for a really good defensive team.
Okay. Yeah, that's sort of my expectation as well. And hey, if a couple things go right and he pops and he fits in with the guys around him, then I think there's an opportunity here for him to, do even more. All right. With that in mind, let's switch gears to his potential backcourt mate here, a former backcourt mate, maybe future again in the starting lineup. We'll see what that actually looks like. Isaiah Watts, 6'3", also going to be a junior guard this year, transferring in after 2 years at Washington State. This past year, he started 17 of 23 games, averaged 11 points, 3.7 rebounds, 2.1 assists, 1.7 steals. Also had 1.9 turnovers a game. Shot about 34.8% from three on just under 6 attempts per game. A little different than Rice, who was a really good free throw shooter at 82%. Watts is about 67 and some change. So maybe not quite as encouraging there overall. I guess I think, Rice, you alluded to it, maybe not a whole lot there. To me, he's like a scoring two guard, and that's like kind of it. And I don't expect much, and an undersized one at that, essentially. Is that a reasonable way to think of him, I guess?
I wouldn't even say scoring two guard. He's
Okay.
a shooting two guard. He
Got
is
it.
a
Okay.
he's an
Mostly catch
off
and shoot
ball,
kind of stuff.
yeah,
Okay.
catch and shoot guy. Now he can shoot off movement and he will take some off the dribble threes,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
he's not someone who will put any pressure on the rim in the half court.
Okay.
If you want him to get to the rim, it has to be in the full court. Now
Hmm.
he is a surprising athlete at times, in that he's 6'3" and he'll throw down some dunks that are pretty wild, but he's not he doesn't have that type of athleticism in the half court. He kind of has like a weird posture, like his back and shoulders hunch forward a lot.
Hmm.
I've followed Watts since he played for Seattle Rotary, and before he went to a prep school in Connecticut, and it was kind of a whole thing to follow, where he's from the Pacific Northwest, but he went to a prep school in Connecticut, and then he was going to go to Seton Hall, and he dropped his commitment from Seton Hall, and it was kind of an open secret that he was probably going to go to UW, but UW seemed like they didn't want to commit, so then WSU came in last second. Like Kyle Smith got him on like a last second deal to help that team, and
Pretty good pickup then for that.
no, absolutely, and talented player. The thing with Watts, and I'll preface this by saying everyone loves Isaiah Watts.
Okay.
Anyone who talks to Isaiah Watts, anyone who's coached Isaiah Watts, you hear nothing but, man, I love Isaiah Watts. His grandpa's former NBA player, Slick Watts, who won a championship with the Supersonics. And his dad played at UW, and so there's a lot of kind of reverence for the family, and Isaiah specifically was very loved and respected, and all that stuff, and everyone says he has a great work ethic and all that stuff. He can be a very frustrating watch at times, in that he is just he is so erratic in terms of his personal decision making on both ends, and at its best, it is him jumping passing lanes, getting steals, throwing down a dunk, and then saying some stuff he shouldn't and getting a tech. And then on the next possession, he'll go down and hit a step back three that he probably shouldn't have taken, but it's fine. But at its worst, he is, missing his sixth shot of the game that is really not a shot you should take after you've missed 5 straight shots that were all very similar. And then he's, making a bad gamble or getting blown by on defense, and really not really helping a team succeed. I think that one of WSU's big issues this year was that they had to rely on Watts to start a lot. Watts is built to be a sixth man in the truest sense, where you want to put him into a game in the first half with 15 minutes left in the first half or whatever, and you want to see if he's got something. Because if he's got something that day, he might really have. He might get you 24 off the bench on really great shooting.
But you don't want to have to bank on him to be the guy to.
But as soon as he's a big part of your plans, it becomes a real worry. Now that might change. He's
still younger player.
Yeah, he's young and he has time, and maybe he's on the path towards better efficiency, whatever it might be. But as of the last 2 years, now 2 years ago it was more muted because he really was in a pretty limited role.
Sure.
He started the year off not playing at all, and by the end of the year he was kind of the team's true sixth man. But in games where he didn't have it, he would still only play like 8 minutes. And so this last year they had to rely on him a lot, and it was just it was a frustrating experience in that the team would kind of come and go with him sometimes. And the truth is, even when he had it, sometimes the team wouldn't, because he doesn't necessarily play a brand of basketball that involves everyone.
That's not to say that breaking the game a little bit, essentially, right?
It's not to say that he can't help a team win because he absolutely can. He's proven he can.
Hmm.
But it's just it has to be in very specific, spurts and
Sure.
starts and stops and such. And if Maryland wants to be like a really good team, I'd imagine they don't want to rely on him, as like a big, offensive production guy outside of, like if you look through his game log at the end of the year, you want to see a couple games that were like 4 points and then a couple games that were like 26. And you're like, that's great. That means he got the games he needed to, he played a lot and he got his buckets and Maryland won. And the games where he didn't have it, they weren't relying on him and forcing anything.
It's reminded me a little bit. I don't know how much of Maryland you watched this past season of like the Selton Miguel experience for Maryland. There was a lot of like sort of breaking the offense early in the year. And eventually over time, he kind of fit in, started to play some better defense. Like when the shots were going in, he started locking in more on both ends. So I'm hopeful there's something there. Made almost 38% of his threes as a freshman. Like we said, about 35% this year. To me, if he's like you said, the ideal role is just like 3 and D guard off the bench. And if there's some nights he gives you more, that's great. I guess you talked a little bit about the defense there. Just quickly touch on that, and then we'll wrap this up. But if he became a little bit more disciplined, fit in, played around other good defenders, I guess is this a plus defender for your team?
I think he can be a plus kind of nail and passing lane defender. He's similar to Myles. He's going to really struggle to be like an elite on the ball guy.
Okay.
He'll have his moments, especially like wings. He kind of bothers more than you would think because I think he's kind of shockingly long.
Mhm.
And if it's especially if it's the type of guy who wants to, settle for jump shots, like he'll do fine with. But WCU played him quite a bit at the point of attack, and he just didn't look great. He's kind of too skinny to get through screens. And his lateral quickness is not as good as his kind of athletic profile would suggest. Again, I think some of that is like the weird posture, and he kind of bends at a weird spot in his body. So again, I kind of say if you're playing a team where there's the right matchup, like let's say another team is playing a guy that he can just lock and trail through screens away from the ball, and then every once in a while jump that pass for a steal, and that guy will not beat him off the dribble at all. He has a really good shot to be like a really impactful defender in that game.
Okay.
If you're playing a team that has, all 5 guys can dribble, drive, and kind of take him to the rack, then he's going to really struggle.
Presumably, these guys like playing together if they're willing to end up at another school where they end up in a backcourt together again. But how did they look when they were out there on the court together?
There were moments where they looked great together.
Okay.
I mean, that one of the more memorable conference stretches in that season was when Watts was playing the most minutes he would end up playing all year, and him and Myles were great. I mean, they do have legitimately really good chemistry in terms of. I think they kind of both play basketball with a real. And this is like maybe a little bit of armchair psychology, but a real kind of like reverence and joy that's kind of enticing to watch sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they really would feed off of each other. Like Myles would hit a shot and Isaiah would be jumping up and down while they're getting back on defense and hyping him up. And then the next possession down, Myles would get a steal and find Isaiah, on the wing for a 3 or whatever. And they would have these kind of moments of great feedback where it's just everything feels like it's clicking for both of them, and they really just enjoy playing basketball together. The issue would be that there are times where neither of them had it.
Gotcha.
And if neither of them have it, it's tough because they both need, a pretty solid usage to be really valuable because they're not going to give you much defensively.
The single most important question of this entire podcast, Bryce, where can people find more of your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, I want to say thank you. You can follow me on Twitter or X or whatever it is, at Bryce Hendricks 14. And then Upside Swings is on all the podcast networks you can think of, and also on YouTube now. So you're more than welcome to listen there and do all that fun stuff. And yeah, Matt, this was a great time. It's always fun to talk about some former Cougs as much as I miss them.
Yeah, my go-to guy for all things PNW in general, but especially the Washington State guys. So Bryce, thank you again for everybody listening to this. Please give Bryce a follow and check out Upside Swings. Rate, review, subscribe. We always appreciate that stuff. And hit that little like button for us down here if you're watching on YouTube. It's always appreciated. We'll get more of these going. If you want to hear specific scouting reports, hit me up and we'll line these kinds of things up for you as we go. And remember, you're the podcast.